go back in time to meet Angstrom again, shortly after his brutal confrontation with Invincible in that devastated world. While Mark, overwhelmed with guilt and remorse, walks away after having destroyed the body of his enemy, we discover that Angstrom is still alive. Despite the fact that his skull has been completely fractured, with a last flash of will, he manages to open a portal to a world inhabited by specialized biological modification beings known for conducting experiments with living organisms. Noticing that an arm emerges from the portal, these creatures drag it to their laboratory. Once there, Angstrom, on the verge of death, begs them to heal him. Many months later, the Invincibles of his personal army finally break into the sea world under his orders. Angstrom has meticulously planned this attack with a single sowing chaos and counterinvestible hatred. To guarantee their loyalty, he promises his soldiers any reward they want in exchange for the total destruction of their world. Meanwhile, Mark meets up with Samantha, still haunted by what happened with Powerplex. Although she insists that she has no responsibility whatsoever, he can't help but feel guilty, aware that it all originated from her battle against her father in Chicago. Although he knows that he is not directly responsible, the emotional burden is too heavy for him. Seeing him so affected, Samantha decides to cancel the dinner she had scheduled with her parents to stay by his side. However, this raises the suspicion that, in fact, he is avoiding presenting them. Samantha justifies her decision by assuring that her parents have a terrible attitude towards superheroes. But Mark, with his own experience with complex father figures, reminds her that nothing can be as bad as that. At that moment, a call interrupts their conversation. The alternate Invincibles have begun their attack. We see how they storm a prison and spread around the world, attacking key government buildings such as the Kremlin in Russia, castles in England, and various structures in America, China, and even in space. Despite the efforts of some heroes to stop them, the strength of these invaders proves overwhelming. Is this what they call a prison in your world? Pathetic. I wouldn't even keep you as a slave in my empire. Meanwhile, Rex helps Rachel settle into her new home. She has chosen a dangerous but economical neighborhood without worrying about safety due to her powers. They both enjoy the moment, and as a sign of appreciation, Rachel suggests going to her room to share an intimate moment. However, at that precise moment, several explosions shake the city. Without hesitation, Rex adopts his role as a hero and prepares to take action. Rachel also wants to join the battle, but Rex convinces her to stay away, reminding her that it's only her first day of retirement. He promises her that if he needs her, he will call her. After a kiss for luck, he leaves for the fight. Meanwhile, when Invincible finally arrives at the prison, he finds it engulfed in flames, with its walls reduced to rubble. Between the dense smoke and the remains of the structure, he discovers the person responsible for the attack, an alternative version of himself. At first, he mistakes him for another soldier of his army and orders him to retreat to expand the radius of destruction. However, he soon realizes that he is the Invincible of this world. Mark demands to know how his opponent has come to this world, but the alternate Invincible refuses to answer. Instead, without warning, he launches into the attack, starting the first battle between Invincibles. The alternate is the first to strike, delivering a brutal combination of blows that ends with Mark crashing into the concrete. Despite the impact, Mark manages to pull himself together, and, while the two face each other in a struggle of pure strength, he asks him again what his real goal is. However, his enemy responds with a violent headbutt that leaves him stunned and throws him to the ground. Without giving him a chance to react, the alternate Invincible pounces on him and begins to strangle him. It is then that, with a sadistic smile, he finally reveals his purpose to her. He has come to this world to make her life miserable. Faced with this statement, Mark takes advantage of a small opening in his defense and, with an accurate blow, destroys the eardrums of his opponent, thus managing to defeat him. But at that very moment, he discovers that he is being watched through one of the surveillance cameras that he had already noticed before. Just then, three superheroes burst onto the scene. Seeing him next to the battered body of the Invincible alternate, they assume that he is responsible for the destruction and rush against him without hesitation. Mark tries to explain to them that he is not the enemy, but they ignore him and attack him forcefully, cornering him. With no intention of harming them, Mark is forced to resist the onslaught without responding with all his ability. Meanwhile, in the midst of the chaos unleashed by the destruction of the prison, Plex manages to escape. Seeing how Mark is being beaten by other heroes, he experiences a deep satisfaction. Convinced that the world has finally recognized the true nature of the supposed hero, he even considers joining the fight. But his attention is diverted by noticing that the alternate Invincible is still standing. Determined to seize the opportunity, he makes him his target, but underestimates his power and is easily defeated. Are there 12 of you? No. That's why. The chaos generated by the worldwide attacks soon spreads through the news and social networks. So Debbie and Oliver find out with disbelief what is happening, as well as Amber and her new boyfriend, and the rest of Mark's friends.
Al igual que Amber y su nuevo novio, y el resto de los amigos.
Aware that both his brother and the world are in danger, Oliver prepares to go out to help, however. Week stops him before he can leave, warning him that, due to his youth and inexperience, he could be easily killed. Despite this, Oliver reminds her that, thanks to her and her father, he learned that his duty is to protect others. With no other options, Debbie reluctantly agrees that it's the right thing to do. She gives him permission to go, but warns him that his home could become a target for the alternate Invincibles, so he shouldn't return for the time being. Instead, she must find Mark. In the meantime, she will look for a safe haven. Back in the prison after having completely defeated his evil counterpart, and with the allied heroes already aware of the situation, Mark leaves everything in his hands and sets off to find out what is really happening. On the way, he meets Samantha and joins her. On the other hand, at the Pentagon, which has also been the target of an attack, the situation is critical. Despite having faced an Invincible of enormous power, a wounded Cecil, a Donald with his severely damaged android body, and the clones without conscience manage to eliminate the invader. In the midst of the devastation, Donald informs his superior that, according to his team's analyses, at least 18 evil Invincibles have arrived on Earth and are destroying everything in their path without following an apparent pattern. However, Donald points out that they might still have a chance, as the Invincible who attacked them didn't seem to be as powerful as the mark of their world. Still, Cecil orders the lab to make more sonars and keep the room ready for a possible immediate response. Donald warns him that the engineering area has been destroyed, but Cecil, anticipating the situation, already had a plan. He explains that they will send calls to everyone requesting help to strengthen their defense. How exactly do we respond to this? We'll make calls. To whom? Everyone, Donald. Everyone. The second day of the attack arrives, and we see how heroes from all over the planet are mobilized, although with little hope of returning alive. Their superiors warn them that in case they fall, they must transmit a message so that they are replaced immediately. For his part, Oliver keeps his promise and, on his tour of the city, helps people trapped in the rubble. During his rescue work, he sees someone flying through the sky in his brother's suit. Believing that it is Mark, he rushes to catch up with him enthusiastically. However, as he gets closer, he discovers to his horror that he is one of the evil Invincibles. Invincible. Wait a minute. Who do we have here? Far away, in mid-flight, Mark realizes that he must defeat each of these versions of himself, one by one. Although he knows that the only way everyone could have come to his world is through Angstrom's powers, he is convinced that the villain died in the past. His thoughts are interrupted when he spots another Invincible fighting a group of heroes nearby. Noticing that they are unable to contain him, Mark decides to intervene and takes him as an adversary, throwing him forcefully against the buildings. Meanwhile, the battle between Immortal and one of the Invincibles takes him to the desert of Egypt. In an unexpected twist of fate, Invincible ends up crashing into an ancient tomb that houses a cursed mummy. The creature tries to possess his body, but he, without hesitation, decides to leave the place immediately. Back in the city, Oliver is knocked down by the Invincible who attacked him, who sets out to crush him with the rubble. However, at the last moment, the young man manages to react and dodge the attack. Soon, other heroes join the fight to support him. Battles around the world continue, with the alternate Invincibles dominating most of the clashes, either in their caped versions or those with long hair. I murdered my own father. Do you really think you can beat me? However, the situation is different in the battle that Mark and Samantha wage against their version of the yellow uniform. The couple manages to beat him so forcefully that the invader, exhausted, admits that, if Mark had no one to protect, he would have defeated him by now. At that moment, another Invincible makes an appearance. He wears the same uniform as Omniman, and although the yellow Invincible orders him to leave, despising his help, he remains firm in his decision to stay. Seeing the seriousness of the situation, Mark asks Samantha to leave, but she refuses to leave him alone. Seconds later, he becomes the target of the new enemy, who easily destroys all his creations. Mark, forced to intervene, is overcome, and ends up knocked down and cornered. Samantha responds by creating a large retaining wall, but this does not last long, as the alternate Invincibles immediately return. While distracting Mark, one of them attacks his girlfriend with a devastating blow, breaking her leg and knocking her out. I've always hated you. Witnessing this, Mark runs to Samantha, but his alternate versions warn him that he will not be able to fight and protect her at the same time. Just then, Cecil's unconscious clones show up to buy time, while Cecil orders Mark to take his girlfriend to the Pentagon. Faced with the magnitude of the battle, Donald asks Cecile for permission to join the combat abroad. Although Cecile refuses at first, she soon realizes that they need all the help possible, so she finally grants her permission. Meanwhile, at the Guardian's base, the battle continues. Immortal is the last Guardian standing next to Darkwing, but soon the latter is cornered and brutally injured, with his bones fractured by his opponent. Seeing this, Immortal lunges at the enemy and, venting all his fury, accuses him of being a crude imitation of Mark. However, the alternate Invincible proves to be much stronger than all the Guardians put together. As proof of his power, he reveals that he has already killed the Martian, and instead of worrying about Immortal's blows, he simply laughs. Because so far he has only been playing. But when Immortal interrupts his taunting, the villain loses patience and, without hesitation, crashes him against the walls of the base with an enormous force. She then decapitates him with a precise kick, and without stopping, she breaks Kate's clones in two. As he contemplates his massacre, the alternate Invincible laments, not that he killed everyone so quickly, but because now the fun is over. However, at that moment Darwin reappears, and taking the invader by surprise, drags him into his dark dimension. Sometime later, it is revealed that some of the Guardians are still alive, including the Martian, who explains that he managed to survive because his core remains intact. On the other hand, Debbie breaks her promise to leave the house because she refuses to leave. She argues that only by staying will she be able to follow the news and stay informed about everything that is happening. Meanwhile, at Rudy's base, Invincible has destroyed all his robots and finally gets to the original. When he is about to finish off the little genius, he is interrupted by Bulletproof, who confronts him in a fierce combat. Taking advantage of the confrontation, Rudy looks for Amanda and confirms that she is still breathing, as is Rex. Aware that the battle is lost, he proposes to retreat. However, as Rex cannot fly, he tasks Bulletproof with the task, while he stays behind to contain Invincible. Now alone, Rex, even knowing that he is at an extreme disadvantage, deploys all his power in a series of attacks. At one point, even managed to make Invincible stumble, but after having beaten him with all his might, he observes with horror that his enemy is still completely unclean. Without hesitation, Invincible grabs him by the neck and begins to strangle him. While doing so, he warns him that he will behead him and then continue with his companions, but, willing to sacrifice everything, Rex, with his last strength, causes a devastating explosion in his own skeleton, submerging the base in flames. Just at the moment when Rachel arrived to try to help, I still have something else left. And what is it? My whole fucking skeleton. Far from there, the comrades who managed to survive contemplate the scene with desolation, realizing that their friend has died. However, he is not the only one, because the corpses of fallen heroes lie scattered around the world, along with the bodies of some Invincibles who were defeated. In the rubble, Donald manages to stay alive, or at least the conscious part of his robotic body is still operational. Meanwhile, at the Pentagon, Mark remains next to his injured girlfriend. Cecil arrives to warn him that he cannot stay in that place, but Mark replies that the other Invincibles know her location and could arrive at any time to assassinate her. However, Cecil chides him harshly for staying motionless, while the whole world needs him, including his mother and his brother. Still, Mark refuses to leave Samantha, even though deep down he knows that when she wakes up, he won't forgive her for neglecting the battle. At the same time, Oliver and his group of heroes manage to emerge victorious. Powerplex, on the other hand, finally feels that he has obtained the revenge he so longed for. Similarly, in space, the invincible invader is finally defeated. The third day of the attack arrives, with Angstrom watching everything from his base. Realizing that the first phase of his plan has been completed, he orders all the surviving invincibles to gather. Phase 1 complete, see you nowhere. This is how we see them congregate at the Grayson house, while some express their contempt for that place. Others claim that not everyone murdered their mother, and that, in their universe, that home represents something important. A memory of when they played with their father. Moments later, Angstrom appears and takes the floor. In his speech he declares that they have not only destroyed Mark's world, but they have also destroyed him. He explains that from now on every person who has survived will associate the name Invincible with the massacre. Having concluded his message, he orders that Mark be found and brought to his presence. However, some of the Invincibles begin to reveal themselves, demanding that Angstrom fulfill his end of the bargain and grant them access to other worlds in order to conquer them. In the midst of the attention, one of them reveals that his agreement with Angstrom was different. He asked for the chance to save Debbie and take her with him. He also suspects that he's not the only one who feels the same way, and he's right. Soon, most of the Invincibles refuse to continue obeying him and demand that he return them to their respective universes. If he refuses, they threaten to torture him. Faced with this mutiny, Angstrom makes a drastic decision. Sends them all to the dead universe where he previously fought Mark. Angstrom. I'm gonna kill you. He doesn't listen to you, idiot. Soon after, Cecil breaks into the hospital where Mark is and informs him that they have located the real person responsible for everything. With no other options, Mark finally decides to act. Without a second thought, he rushes into battle and directly confronts Astrom. While they are fighting, Angstrom reveals to him that he had a team of surgeons prepared in another dimension, in case he couldn't win the first time, and thanks to them he managed to survive. Mark attacks fiercely, but Angstrom deploys his dimensional portals. However, this time Invincible has learned from his mistakes and manages to dodge them accurately. However, Angstrom had already foreseen this and, as a countermeasure, releases an army of programmed drones to push him inside a portal. Mark skillfully wades through it, but the villain then opens an even bigger portal, from which thousands of drones emerge and descend on him like a relentless rain. The overwhelming offensive takes him by surprise, and, unable to react in time, Mark is violently slammed into the concrete. Mark continues to fight fiercely, trying to fight his way through the horde of drones. However, seeing that his opponent still manages to resist, Angstrom summons thousands of additional robots, which begin to push Mark towards the portal. With a triumphant expression, the villain reveals his true purpose to him. He does not intend to kill him, but simply send him away, so that he cannot prevent him from destroying everything he loves. Hearing these words, Invincible reacts with renewed fury, finding within himself an even greater strength. Based on pure determination and brutality, he manages to break through the machines to subdue Angstrom, without hesitation. He sets out to behead him as punishment for his genocide. Just at that moment, Oliver arrives on the scene and begs him to do it, to execute him without hesitation. Because after all the deaths he has caused, Angstrom does not deserve to stay alive. He urges her to hurry up before the villain finds a way to escape to another dimension. Mark understands that his brother is right, but at the last second, just as he is about to deliver the final blow, Angstrom manages to open a portal and flee, although in the process he is forced to sacrifice his arm. On the other side of the portal, Angstrom arrives seriously injured in the universe where his trusted surgeons are waiting for him. In desperation, he demands that they cure him immediately. However, this time those dark beings refuse to obey him. Like the other Invincibles he made deals with, they too were deceived and have now understood that Angstrom's word is worthless. Taking advantage of their advanced technology, the surgeons take control of the villain's powers and give him one last choice. He can submit to them and work under their orders to stay alive, or he can resist and be dissected as a simple experiment more for their research. Meanwhile, Mark returns to the city, only to face the devastating reality of the destruction. The whole world is working together to remove the rubble, recover the bodies of the fallen, and rescue the survivors. But as they do, the questions remain unanswered. Why were they attacked? Why did the attackers have the face of Invincible? At the Pentagon hospital, Mark remains by Samantha's side, still unconscious. He reflects on the irony of his situation. For so long he tortured himself believing that he had killed Angstrom, but now he regrets that he did not do it when he had the opportunity. At that moment, Cecil appears and tries to reassure him. He tells him that he cannot blame himself for being a good person. And although Angstrom could return one day, the only thing left is to prepare for a possible new attack. Then Cecil informs her that her mother has been safe all this time at her boyfriend's house, and that New York urgently needs help. Faced with this, Mark decides to leave Samantha for a moment to join Oliver and the other heroes in the rescue efforts, however. Before leaving, he makes it clear that, despite their collaboration, he and Cecil are still not on the same side. Upon arriving in the city, Oliver receives him with affection, but Powerplex, still consumed by rancor, does not hesitate to attack. Oliver knocks him down immediately, but Mark once again opts for compassion. With the help of his brother, they manage to immobilize Powerplex, enduring his shocks until he finally runs out of power, however. As he walks away, Powerplex screams with all his might, addressing the crowd. All these deaths are Invincible's fault. His words resonate among those present, sowing the seed of doubt in their hearts. Later, back at the hospital, Mark talks to his unconscious girlfriend, quietly confesses that he can no longer ignore the truth. One way or another, all those deaths are his responsibility. Armstrong came back just for him, and for that the world paid the price. Just then, Samantha's parents arrive at the hospital and demand a moment alone with their daughter. Mark, respectful, prepares to leave, but before he can do so, Samantha's mother recognizes him and stops him. With a serious tone, she warns him that her daughter possesses powers, although she herself does not know her true identity. In addition, he mentions that he saw on the news how an old friend of Samantha, a young woman with no special abilities, lost her life during the attacks. With this, he refutes the idea that only heroes are exposed to danger, making it clear that no one is really safe. Meanwhile, at another point in the city, Immortal comes back to life after his head is reunited with his body. Through tears, he is greeted by Kate, who cannot contain the emotion of seeing him again. With a determined expression, Immortal informs Donald that he no longer plans to sacrifice himself for the world, and, in a moment of deep sincerity, confesses to Kate his desire to start a family with her. Soon after, the former Guardians meet with Cecil, who informs them about the recent changes, Immortal and Kate's retirement decision, Darwin's mysterious disappearance, and the critical condition of several heroes who have not yet managed to recover, including Amanda. That's when Mark learns a devastating news: Rex died in battle. Cecil, wasting no time, warns everyone that his enemies will not stop to wait until they are fully recovered. Therefore, he asks Mark to take over the leadership of the Guardians, because the team needs a strong figure to guide them through the difficult times ahead. However, Mark flatly refuses to accept the position. As a last attempt to convince them, Cecil follows him into the hallway and, with a more conciliatory tone, reminds him that, despite their differences, they are both on the same side. Their only goal is to save lives. In addition, he makes it clear that he will always be ready to listen to you when you need it. Although Mark remains firm in his decision to reject him, this time before leaving, he sincerely thanks him for his offer. Later, while continuing to help in the rescue and recovery of corpses, Mark begins to feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of the tragedy. Guilt and exhaustion weigh on his shoulders, and the feeling of helplessness consumes him. However, his anguish is interrupted when, suddenly, a Viltrumite named Conquest appears before him. The towering warrior has been sent by the Empire to check if Mark has kept his end of the bargain. You received orders, you had time, you enjoyed more freedom than many, and yet, this planet is not prepared for the arrival of the Viltrumite Empire. Now is not a good time. Observing the devastated state of the planet, Conquest realizes that he has failed and, unceremoniously, informs him that he will be executed for his failure, but Mark, exhausted of everything, with the anger accumulated inside, limits himself to look up and respond coldly. He explains that all the destruction he sees around him is his responsibility, that every death and every ruin are the result of his own actions, and at that moment, he no longer wants to lament anymore. He just wants to take out all his anger on someone. Without another second's hesitation, he accepts the battle and throws himself against the Viltrumite with all his might.